Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. Welcome. And we are beginning the very last session of this series of classes on Kabbalah.
You said that last time, Mike.
Did I? Well, we're going to have more. We're going to have more. This is
Yes,
series 3 that we've been doing. The last one was on the Shekhinah, and the one previously was on the higher worlds. And really, our subject this morning is in some ways the most intense of the lot, and really a very beautiful but intense idea of religion in general, right? This idea of Mashiach. You can have one person who can come and change everything, right? One person who comes and transforms religion and transforms the entire world. And what's really interesting about this idea, I mean, just even before we start really, is that it's present in almost every single world tradition. I mean, obviously the Christians have it, but they kind of took it from us. But the Buddhists, they have an idea, and the Hindus have that idea, and some forms of Islam also have this idea. So it's a prevalent idea, and we're going to be looking at it through the lens of Kabbalah. And Kabbalah has really interesting things to say about some of the questions that we know we're waiting for the Mashiach, right? We know we're waiting for Mashiach, but where does Mashiach come from, so to speak? And what happens exactly when they come? Suddenly everything's transformed, or what's that process look like? And how does it change our experience as people when it happens, when Mashiach comes? What are the forces that help make it happen? We waited a long time, right? We waited a very long time. So how much longer are we going to have to wait? I'm not sure I can answer that one definitively, but
Well, didn't the Orthodox in New York consider the Mashiach, that rabbi?
the Rabbi, right? The Chabad Rabbi, yeah, the Rabbi. There's some of them. So you write the Chabad Rabbi in the end of his life was asked, "Are you Mashiach?" And he didn't really say no. And so some of his followers started to say he is Mashiach. And to this day, the Chabad is split into those who believe that the Rebbe was Mashiach and those who believe he wasn't. But there's been a number of figures in the last 2,000 years who've all said, "I am Mashiach," and didn't always work out. And I mean, we're not going to spend that much time on this, but maybe the most big of those figures was Shabbatai Tzvi, who said, "I am Mashiach," and he was so believed that there were people all around the Jewish world who were selling their properties and getting ready to go to Jerusalem because they thought Mashiach has come, Messiah has come, let's do it. And in the end, he seems to have been, according to texts, able to do things that were somewhat miraculous. But in the end of his life, the Ottoman Empire, which was where he was living, they took him to Turkey, and he converted to Islam, and created a disappointment, to say the least, among all the people who thought he was Mashiach. So we have a kind of an interesting but complex relationship with this whole idea of Mashiach. But we're going to go into it and kind of really talk about, well, what is this idea? Where does it come from? What would it mean for us when we see it? And again, everybody's welcome to ask questions or have any comments. This is an idea that's been with us for a very long time, for at least 3,000 years. And the prophets started to speak about this about 3,000 years ago. You could even go back further and say, well, Moses, on some level, was a figure that was like a Mashiach. And in Kabbalah, they call Moses Mashiach, because Moses was a singular figure who came and delivered the people from bondage in Egypt. And when the prophets began to speak of Mashiach, maybe I'm going to just close that door, they really saw it more in a Moses type of figure, which was someone who would deliver the Jews from a situation of being in bondage, right? So Mashiach at first wasn't a spiritualized, it was a military leader with, some spiritual gravitas, of course, but the idea of Mashiach, when the prophets started to give visions about it, was, well, the Jewish people were going through periods of history where other nations and empires were militarily superior to Israel, and said, well, God's going to send a Mashiach, and the word Mashiach itself means anointed. So God's going to send someone anointed of the stock of David, who was the first king of Israel, and that person is going to wipe away all the enemies and make you victorious and redeem you. But pretty quickly, that idea started to become more spiritualized, and that person who was going to be sent was also able to spiritually start to transform the world and, in effect, make changes to the world and do things that very quickly literally changed the very fabric of the world. That person would have spiritual powers, unbelievable spiritual powers, and that eventually, when Mashiach would come, would be the beginning of the days of Mashiach. And days of Mashiach are like the end of days, and that's when the world is going to be. We can't even imagine what the world will be like. It will be a world of peace, a world of love, a world of all these things. And so,
Doesn't that kind of sound like Jesus?
So this is what Jesus's followers, who were all Jewish, right? And Jesus was Jewish, and they thought that he was the Messiah, and that whole idea of is he or was he not the Messiah was coming out of a Jewish tradition of they've been waiting for Messiah already for a long time. A lot of the texts the first text we're going to study is one of the texts that the Christians say, oh, that's talking about Jesus. One of the reasons that I don't want to get too much into the question of the Christian approach and of Jesus, but from a traditional Jewish point of view, why was Jesus not the Messiah? According to what Jews say, well, as we're going to read, it says that the Messiah brings peace on earth. And you look what happened after Jesus came, no peace on earth. So that part, so that's a traditional response. I don't want to spend that much time on that. I'd rather look at how Jews look at Messiah and how that's looked at it. But yeah, the Christian idea of Messiah comes out of the Jewish idea of Messiah, because we were waiting for Messiah, and then Jesus's followers said, it's him. And the other people who weren't accepting Jesus said, no, not him. And then that kind of created 2,000 years of difficult history, because the Christians felt you didn't accept them, and as you said, it wasn't him. So that, go ahead.
Could it be that the Messiah is not, it's more like a code, that it's a shift in consciousness of human beings, that it's like the soul of all humans are shifting, so it's not one person.
Beautiful, and we're going to get precisely to that place.
Oh.
And at the same time, there is also this idea. So what do you do with it of a person who we're all part of it, but the one person who somehow can embody that change or help bring about that change?
Or put them in a mental institution.
Yeah. We often talk about, right? If you had somebody who had, those kinds of ideas, but on the other hand, if that person had the kind of power that some people think that Mashiach would happen, it's the one, right? So they would be able to effectuate changes in people. It might be able to convince at least some people that this has happened. But we're going to get into all of that. It's a very big idea, right? It's a very intense idea, and this idea of if everything is changing, how does it change, and how do we prepare for it, and what happens to people who don't want it to happen or against it, and those are all interesting. How quickly does it happen? So we're going to begin by reading the text, the most important text from the prophets, right? Isaiah. almost 3,000 years old. More like, 2,700 maybe years old. But an old prophecy by Isaiah 11, which again is one that's the main Jewish text both for Messiah and the days of Messiah. And Christians also love this text. They focus on different parts, and you'll see Isaiah 11 on billboards, next to highways, especially in the South, but also all over the country. It's also our text. And read, we just read this at Passover. So somebody like to read for us, Isaiah 11.
Okay, I'll do it. But a shoot shall grow out of the stump of Jesse, a twig shall sprout from his stock. The Spirit of the Lord shall alight upon him, a spirit of wisdom and insight, a spirit of counsel and valor, a spirit of devotion and reverence for the Lord. He shall sense the truth by his reverence for the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes behold, nor decide by what his ears perceive. Thus he shall judge the poor with equity and decide with justice for the lowly of the land. He shall strike down a land with the rod of his mouth and slay the wicked with the breath of his lips. Justice shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his waist. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard lie down with the kid, the calf, the beast of prey, and the fatling together, with a little boy to herd them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion, like the ox, shall eat straw. A babe shall play over a viper's hole, and an infant pass his hand over an adder's den. In all of my sacred mount, nothing evil or vile shall be done, for the land shall be filled with the devotion to the Lord, as water covers the sea.
It's a beautiful prophecy. It's amazing. And what are the main? So what's going to happen? Anybody? How would you summarize? What's going to happen?
I think that one of the things that I see is peace, right? Peace. There's no war,
Yeah.
no nation against nation, right? Nobody's against anybody. Everybody's all friends, even between animals, right? Like it says here, a babe shall play over the viper's hole. If we can imagine over that, I think that's pretty much what it summarizes. It's just love and respect and honor.
It's so
Heaven on earth.
Yeah, heaven on earth, exactly. It's right. Somehow earth and heaven, and that's how Kabbalah sees it, are going to kind of merge, right? I mean, it's the very fabric of this world. Like, how do you change the instincts of an animal? But somehow the instincts of an animal are going to change. And if the instincts of animals, hopefully instincts of human beings too.
Yeah.
Utopia.
I also think that it goes from being secular to being more devout, and that there's devotion to the Lord. So there definitely is a spiritual part of it as well.
Beautiful. There's a spirit. One of the verses that our tradition focuses on is, right, devotion will fill. For the land shall be filled with devotion to the Lord. The word in Hebrew is really knowledge of the Lord. The land will be filled with knowledge or devotion to the Lord as water covers the sea, right? So that's a pretty big change.
Yeah.
To consciousness. And then there's also a beginning part, which, right, there's this person who has these qualities, right? A spirit of counsel and valor, spirit of wisdom. And with a little heftiness too, right? Slay the wicked with the breath of his lips, and justice shall be the girdle of his loins. So there is a militaristic aspect too, at least to make it happen, right? Or some kind of force, right? It's not. This is good. This is why this person has been seen as a military leader, at least in Judaism, to some degree. But it's a pretty total transformation, right? This is something pretty amazing. We're going to get into more detailed what it's going to look like afterwards. But Maimonides, who writes about this, right, 1700 years after the prophecies, he says Melech HaMashiach, the King Messiah, right, is going to be a king, and don't expect him to do. This is not the next. This is not the one that we're reading here. This is a different one. Don't expect him to do miracles, but when he comes, it's going to be a wiping away of all the enemies of Israel, and that's how it's going to start. And so I want to focus for a little bit, just a few minutes, on this idea of one person. How can we even imagine this idea of one person coming and changing everything? To some degree, the only imagery that we have is from the person of Moses, right? Because Moses is one person who came and completely liberated the people. And the image, and this is something, right, that we do await this one person, right? It's one of the 11 articles of faith that Maimonides writes. And it said, right, Ani Mamin, and we know Cantor sings this several times a year. Ani Mamin, Ani Mamin. And this is one of the articles of faith of Judaism, that I believe with full faith in the coming of the Messiah, the Mashiach, of this one person who will come and liberate the Jewish people in the world. And even this is how this sentence is said by Maimonides. And even though he tarries, right, even though I'm waiting for him and still he's not coming, still I await him, still I'll wait for him. And the Jews have waited for Mashiach for thousands of years. Waiting, it's one of the blessings of the weekday Amidah. So one of the blessings we say at every weekday Amidah, 3 times a day, observant Jews have said this for thousands of years, speedily cause a sign of David, right? One person, your servant, to flourish and increase his power by your salvation. For we hope in your salvation all day. Blessed are you, Lord, who causes the power of salvation to flourish. So somehow the salvation brought by this one person is connected to God's salvation, the anointed of God. And this one person, the closest that we have as an example is Moses, because Moses was the one person. And so I remember, I've spoken about this before, when I was in rabbinical school and I was working for an elderly rabbi who was in his 90s. He spoke about this a lot, and he would often talk about how the redemption from Egypt was the partial redemption, right? Because the Jews were taken out of Egypt by miracles, but that was just a taste of what's going to happen one day. And this rabbi, what he would talk about is that the establishment of the state of Israel, which is such a big miracle, was another step towards the full redemption. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what happened with the situation of the redemption in Egypt? These are really important verses from the book of Exodus 2:23-25. A long time after that, the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from bondage rose up to God, and God heard their moaning, and God remembered the covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. Now, this idea that when humanity is going through a really, really hard time, God sends somebody to help. And it's the cry of people that goes up into the heavens. And so right after these verses is the episode of the burning bush, where God called Moses to come and help, sending Moses to help the Jewish people. And when there's a great cry of pain that comes up, something happens, right? Something is sent. And so then what would the life of a person who's like a Mashiach, what would it look like? So what we have is the life of Moses, right? So Moses begins, and he's, from the very moment that he's born, you can tell this is a special life. It's not a life of everybody else, right? When Moses is born, he has to be hidden. And Rashi says because so much light is coming from his face, that his mother was worried that the Egyptians would find him, because the Egyptians made a decree to kill every single human being, every single baby boy. And they put him in this basket, and the name for basket is the same name as the Noah's Ark, and it's made of the same materials as Noah's Ark. So this baby is going to save the Jewish people. And then he grows up in Egypt amongst, right, the greatest civilization of his day, and takes up all that secular knowledge. And Philo, the Jewish philosopher, says that he learned all of the great knowledge of Egypt, which was a great civilization, right? He learned how to be a leader, he learned how to take up all of that. And then, and even, as much as we say that the Egyptians and their gods were nothing compared to our God, Egypt was still a spiritual center of the world, right? They had one of the great religions of ancient days. And we even see in the plagues that their magicians, so to speak, had some powers, right? They were able to make snakes that, Moses' snake. So Moses also was raised with some of that knowledge of Egyptian religion. But then Moses had also an awakening where he went out to see the Jewish people and he saw the inhumanity of human beings against other human beings, right? And he said, this cannot stand. And one day it became too much, and he saw an Egyptian striking a Jew, and he killed the Egyptian, and had this moment of not of seeing within himself this role of standing up against human injustice. And then he had to flee because Egypt, because Pharaoh went after him. And then we have Moses's time with Jethro. And so when you read the Torah, right, Jethro he's not Jewish, but he's considered to be the high priest of Midian, and he marries his daughter Tzipporah. But in Kabbalah, they say that Jethro was not just a high priest, but he also was a mystical master. And they imagine that Jethro, all the prophets of the ancient world used to go to Jethro to learn from him. And Kabbalah imagines that Jethro was had the knowledge to call all the angels, not just the lesser angels, but the angels that were part of behind the spheres and the planets. And so that really Moses was learning from Jethro, the Zohar imagines, for all those years when Moses was away. We can imagine, if we're trying to see what it was like for someone of Moses' stature, that Jethro could see that this is a special person, and Jethro was training him and helping him to become who he would later be. He spent all those decades with him. And Kabbalah really sees this, that Jethro was this person who knew contemplative practices and could call on God. And Moses learned from him and he was sending Moses to Sinai, to Mount Sinai, because this was a sacred place to practice. And then one day Moses had this experience of the burning bush, which was a culmination of all those years with Jethro. And then that's how Moses started his idea. So this idea that a Mashiach, even though they're appointed by God, has to go through training and has to learn things, and then at a certain time they're ready to then go out and follow their calling into the world. And so this could be how we would imagine that Mashiach would come. But we have this.
Rabbi, could I make one comment? So it's interesting you talk about the militaristic, because I never thought about that. And I always thought that when the Messiah comes, everyone will accept him. But even if you look at Moses, like the Pharaoh and the other Egyptians didn't accept him or God, they didn't accept God. And so we had to slay them, the firstborn and the Red Sea and all of that. And so it's interesting to think about the fact that when the Messiah comes, not everybody is going to be on board, and something's going to have to happen to make sure that those people are somehow minimized. I don't want to say necessarily slain, but minimized.
Beautiful, thank you. Well, the Kabbalah really looks into this deeply. We're going to look at that because they think not only are there some individual people who might not be accepting of it, but there's whole streams of society that might not be so accepting of it. And even before the coming of Mashiach, there's this idea of having to pave the way for those ideas to come. Because one of the things you get from Moses is that his birth feels so planned, right? When you hear the story, it's not like it was just a random, he was so planned. And so, it's kind of like God plans for Mashiach to come, but God also needs to pave the way so that the ideas are kind of already, there's some people who are ready to take up some of those ideas, and so that it can be taken up. Because if not, what if Mashiach comes and Mashiach starts to get ready to change the world? Everybody's like, so it's we have this idea, we're going to go into it later, of Mashiach ben Yosef, of Messiah. There's a Messiah, son of Joseph, who is an earlier version of Mashiach who will come to pave the way for Mashiach ben David, Messiah, the son of David, to really make that happen. And the Zohar goes into great detail to talk about this process of both Mashiach coming and the days of Mashiach, Yemot HaMashiach coming. And the militaristic aspect is a big part of it. And even though we don't focus as much as Christians do on kind of apocalypse and all of that, but we do have this idea of Mashiach.
What does this line mean? It's twice now. I've seen it as the waters cover the sea. What kind of water? I mean, the sea is water, so
Well, just
what
that,
does it
well, it's
mean?
saying that the knowledge of God will be so widespread, just like when you're in the water of the ocean, are you covered in water? You're totally covered, right? Water is everywhere. It's a whole ocean worth of
Okay.
water. That's how much consciousness of God there will be when Mashiach comes. That'd be the spiritual transformation.
Similar.
So let's go forward and read. I just want to show even how in a kind of non-Kabbalistic, a mainstream Jewish idea of what this transformation will be like, we have this idea of a total transformation, and a transformation also in spirituality. So someone read for us Maimonides on page 2, what it will look like to have this messianic plan. Yeah, thanks.
In that time, there will be no more hunger or war or jealousy and competition, for the power of goodness will very much hold sway in the world, and all the delights will be as abundant as dust. And there will no longer be a need for work in the world, but rather the only occupation will be to know God. And therefore, there will be great wise men and women who know hidden, profound matters, and people will attain the knowledge of their Maker according to the capacity of each person, as it states in Isaiah 11:9. And the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Pretty amazing vision, right? No need to work anymore. We're just all going to be meditating and contemplating God. But pretty big transformation from where we are now, right? But I love how this part of it, a lot of it is that everybody is going to be engaged in what we're doing now, kind of thinking about these matters and be a part of life, and that there'll be a kind of spiritual awakening amongst people that will be part of this transformation. And if you're just focused on this, you don't want to go, you're not waging war, right? You're engaged in thinking about bigger, higher, more important
So
things.
it's not just for Jews, it's for everybody.
It starts with Jews, but then it goes to everybody.
And it's like a mirror, no? I mean, other prophets like Daniel and all the prophets talk about how in heaven, everybody is, claiming God and worshiping God and stuff like that, right? So it sounds like it's a mirror of what's going to happen here.
It's exactly it, right? It's kind of like an overlapping of heaven and earth, right? Like literally heaven and earth are merging, and this world becomes heavenly, and we're but still being in this physical world. That's the really powerful part. But let's go to the next one. The
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah. So.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to specifically what you might call the rationalistic element here, where Maimonides says nobody will be working, everybody will be seeking to know God. Now, there are many levels in which you can discuss what that might mean, but he's very much being there, the rabbi as philosopher, I think, and not everyone is engaged in that kind of labor, but it's an interesting idea that he puts that in there very specifically. And now you could say knowing God means many things, but there's part of it is an intellectual idea, and when you take it, somehow people won't be working. I don't know what the word is there, if it's avodah, but everybody will be able to devote themselves to what only the elite devote themselves to in his time.
I agree. It's why I included, because it's all the more striking that Maimonides is saying this, who's a rational, very much a philosopher and a rationalist. So the way he's imagining this transformation is so total, completely different from how we imagine. Because I don't know, maybe he could imagine a world where the artificial intelligence fueled, the AI chatbots, robots are doing all the farming for us, but and running our world. But I don't know. But he seems to be imagining a world where we're able to, at least in a very major way, spend a lot of our time knowing God and not, going to the office and doing all the things that we spend, or maybe our minds are on that, even though as we're doing the other.
I was just thinking about this. It's ironic because if we look at the media today, right, they make it seem like everybody's just forgetting about God, right? Different of what it's said in here.
Beautiful. I think we'll get that, because there's different currents in our modern world, right? There's a current that's kind of, and then also there is an increasing number of people who are interested in all of this, and maybe part of all of this coming to bear fruit.
But this is so unrealistic. People they need a purpose. Just only,
It seems so hard to imagine, right?
Yeah.
It seems so hard.
Pull out the garbage. I mean,
The AI
The
driven.
robots will throw it
The
out.
robots.
But I know, I hear you. I hear you. Maybe Maimonides as a philosopher is even too cut and dry. Like you'll see Kabbalah. Kabbalah sees it more organically in my mind. Maimonides as a philosopher is almost more, imagining something so extreme. So let's continue. I want to get to the Baal Shem Tov and some of the others. So the Baal Shem Tov, he's mystic. He's the first Chassid. He's the founder of Hasidism. Someone want to read this, or Ian, do you want to continue?
Okay. However, this consciousness, which was revealed during the exodus from Egypt, was only on the level of intellect and of sensing the divine life force. And this is the vision of an unclear mirror. The Holy Spirit expressed as feeling and intellectual understanding. In the future messianic age, they will see before their eyes the letters of the Torah and prayers which they learn and pray. And they will see that they, the letters, are whole worlds and sparkling lights. And they will see before their eyes the supernatural worlds and lights and divine names and claims. And it says in Isaiah 30:20, and your eyes shall behold your teacher.
That'll be the work, is learning stuff, right?
It's gonna be learning stuff, but it's gonna be so alive that it's gonna be not on the intellectual level. It's gonna be so alive spiritually, right? And it's gonna feel, when we get a taste of spirit matters, that's going to be like the bottom level of what we're experiencing. It's going to be so much alive, and the Baal Shem Tov imagines visions, and it has these. The Baal Shem Tov, what he even said was, in the days of Mashiach, we'll be able to read each other's thoughts and kind of connect that way and teletransport. He has this idea of Kvitzat Adir, leaping over distances, and the way I understand it is, what he's saying is that there's going to be a very big change in consciousness, and to some degree, I mean, even these days, look what we're doing with Zoom. It's kind of like one concrete step in that direction. Meeting together and sitting to. Sometimes we meditate together. Hi, Emma. Little girl come see
You
what.
don't want to miss out on it.
Yeah,
Mashiach, this kid.
yeah, really.
Elijah.
And so this idea of a change in consciousness, right? And then I think if we were to see how different our consciousness is now than it was 150 years ago, we would say that there's pretty big changes, and well, I think we can talk about a little bit more later, but it's the idea that for the mystics, the changes are not just physical, but they're also very much in consciousness, how we relate to each other and to the world. And that's going to be part of it. And so, when we pray, when we learn, when we study, it will be so alive spiritually. It will be so beautiful and wonderful. And we'll be like being in heaven, right? You'll be able to.
Well, it's
see
like
that there's
musical Shabbat. It's so different from. regular
Exactly.
Shabbat.
Musical Shabbat.
The Baal Shem Tov, if I may say so, is, I don't know if he had in mind what the Maimonides says in the Mishnah Torah here, and I don't know the context in the text that he's referring to, but he seems to be saying, well, you have it on the level of intellect, or whatever text he's referring to, but here it goes beyond intellect. And I don't know if it's a critique of the intellectual understanding but anyhow, it transcends it. The idea that every letter is a whole world is a suggestion of something deeper and transcendent.
Well, he's just using the idea that the Exodus from Egypt was a first level of redemption that created a change in the world, which is a
Okay.
traditional Jewish idea. And also when you're free, you don't have to spend your whole day working, and you're free to intellectual pursuits, right? So you're free to but he's even more nice. I guess he's saying that opened the Exodus from Egypt created the idea of freedom, right? Created the idea of intellectual freedom on some level, but this is going to create a whole other level of freedom that's hard for us to imagine because we haven't experienced it yet, right? So this is part of what he's doing. Now I want to go back to the process a little bit of how we get there, because the way we're kind of taught to think about it is, okay, you wake up one day and you hear on the radio or from your friend or from your rabbi or in Mashiach's here, so it's all changed. But Kabbalah has a slightly different understanding of it. So let's go to text number 4 and 5. I'm just going to read for us text number 4 and 5. I don't know if you want to continue.
Well, might as well.
All right.
All
right.
Then everyone steps forward. Rabbi Yehuda began and said, "Who is she that looks forth as the dawn, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, terrible as an army with banners?" Song of Songs 10. This verse we have learned and explained, but who is she that looks forth? This is Israel. At the time when God will raise them, Israel up and take them out of the exile. He will open for them a tiny opening of light, the narrowest of the narrow. And after that, another opening, which is a little bigger, until God opens for them the heavenly gates that open up unto the 4 corners of the world. Everything that God does for Israel and for the righteous among them happens like this, and not all at once. Like a person placed in darkness who has always dwelled in darkness, when one wants to bring him into the light, you need to begin by opening a small aperture of light, like the eye of a needle, and afterward another opening that is a little bigger, and thus each time a bit more, until finally you can shine the full light upon him. Thus it is with Israel, as it says, little by little I will drive them out from before you. And so it is with someone who is cured of an illness. It does not happen all at once. Rather, he improves little by little until he is cured.
Interesting, right? So both an idea that it's a slow change, and not only because that's the way the heavens work, but also the way we work. We need that process to be able to be ready for it. If suddenly some huge change happened, how do we deal with that? We would end up in the facility, but the humanity, we also need a slower change.
So, yesterday from the services, I took away something I read. It said, trust in Adonai, not in humans.
Yeah,
And so that applies here. If you trust in God and believe it, then you can understand it. Not if some human tells you that, but this is someone sent by God.
beautiful. And you have to build up that trust, right?
Yes.
And so someone who comes is there's got to create all the conditions for this to happen. And it's a lot of different things, it's not like you don't go from 0 to 100 in 1 second.
Yeah.
Unless you have a Tesla, but electric cars. I wouldn't recommend it always, right? No.
So the Zohar, who's considered the authors of the Zohar as opposed to?
So the Zohar is, it's coming out of 1200 Spain probably, and the Kabbalah from there. They say that whoever wrote the Zohar pretended to be writing as a 2nd century sage in Israel, but it's not true. So it's really there was a group of Kabbalists in Spain in early medieval times who brought about what we call Kabbalah now, and they're the ones who did this. And so it's De Leon who probably wrote the Kabbalah, who wrote the Zohar. So they were mystics, so they live in this world. They were trying to imagine this from their experience, and they said, well, we know how spiritual world works, and you can't just go from, you need a process. So imagine this process going forward. And can you read the next one too, please?
Thus there will appear a pillar of fire standing from above below, from the heavens to the earth, for 40 days. And all the nations of the world shall see it. And at that time, the King Messiah will rise to leave the Garden of Eden, in a place called the Bird's Nest, and he will reveal himself in the land of the Galilee. And then the Messiah shall be hidden for 12 months, and the pillar of fire shall return as it was before, and the Messiah shall be concealed within it, and the pillar shall not be seen. And after 12 months, they will lift up the Messiah inside the pillar to the heavens, and there he will receive the power and crown of kingship. And when he descends again, the same pillar of fire will be seen once more by the whole world, and then the Messiah will be fully revealed.
It's kind of this idea of a process, even if you don't look at the details of this, but it can't happen all at once. It takes time and comes and leaves, and there's maybe there would be a sense of humanity or people being aware that there is some change, and then that people saying, no, it's nothing, and then coming again. We go back and forth, right? Human beings, we can't have everything. You need to go back and forth a little bit. You need to have a process. You need to have revelation and then hidden, and we need to go through that. And there's also this big idea we've been talking about, that there's going to be resistance, right? Which is kind of hinted at here. It's not everybody's going to be like, hooray, let's do this. But what we can do is kind of prepare by opening our hearts and minds and waiting for it and praying for that time, which is a really beautiful idea. So did I include the other one? I didn't include. Okay. So then there's this idea, which is really interesting, that I started talking about before, that there's not just one Messiah, right, to prepare for it, because it's a process, but there's two Messiahs, right? There's Messiah, son of Joseph, and Messiah, son of David. Messiah, son of Joseph is also a great soul, but a lesser soul, and who kind of paves the way, prepares a vehicle for the others one. And what's been so interesting is there have been all kinds of Jewish leaders over the ages who've seen themselves as a spark of this Mashiach ben Yosef. So the Adir, who was one of the great Kabbalists, said, I am part of that soul of Mashiach ben Yosef, and that some of the truths that he was revealing, he felt were helping to pave the way. But even the Vilna Gaon, so the Vilna Gaon, who was one of the great leaders of Europe, who was completely against the Hasidim. He's the one who said, if your child marries a Chassid, throw your child out. But he was a great Kabbalist too, and he imagined himself as from the seed of Mashiach of Ben David, from the soul. And so there's this, I forgot to include this, but there's this is from a text about his life, or about, and it is very fitting that it was the Gra is one of the names for the Vilna Gaon, that revealed a great part of the teaching about the two Messiahs, because he himself was a spark of the Messiah, the son of Joseph in his generation, as is stated in the book, The Voice of the Turtle Dove, in a number of places. He considered himself to be. In all of his life, he strove to fulfill the tasks of the Messiah, the son of Joseph, to arouse the ingathering of the exiles, to reveal the secrets of the Torah and the way of service, which would prepare the way for the redemption that is to come. This idea that the Messiah, the son of Joseph, starts to gather people in and starts to reveal secrets. And this idea is from the Talmud originally, that there's two Messiahs. The Talmudic idea goes all the way back to that. But Rav Kook used to think that Herzl was Messiah, son of Joseph, because Herzl kind of paved the way for return to Israel. But it goes even more than that, even more than two Messiahs. And the Zohar speaks about 10,000 sparks of Messiah. It's almost like this idea that we have in, there's a Buddhist idea, right? That I think it's Avatikishwara, was going to be liberated and decided, I can't be liberated until all other beings are liberated, and burst himself into millions of shards and said, each one of them is going to be a version of me that's going to help redeem humanity. So we kind of have ideas that are almost like that. I wanted to show this text by the Zohar. Who's going to read the next one?
Yes, that's me.
All right, Ian, go ahead.
Let the heavens be glad and let the earth rejoice. Come and see, the sun is revealed during the day, concealed at night, and shines as 600,000 stars. Similarly, regarding the faithful shepherd Moses, after he passed out of the world, a generation is worthy. He returns and reincarnates to shine for the 600,000 souls of Israel in that generation. And this is the secret reincarnation that about it, Paulette, King Solomon said, one generation passes away and another generation comes, and the earth abides forever.
It's an idea that the Moses comes back in every generation. So there's this another idea that some kind of version of Mashiach comes in every generation, whether we see it or not, to help everybody. So Mashiach isn't just one person we've been waiting for thousands of years, but every generation gets a little bit of.
Isn't it kind of an idea of hope? We
Yeah.
have something to hope for.
It is.
People feel better.
It's an amazingly optimistic idea, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
That this is possible even,
Right.
right? And that we, and that it can happen, that the world could be a better place, because you could just look at the world and say it's not so evident, and so there's this idea, it's a very optimistic idea. And the Baal Shem Tov takes it even further than this, of what it means to be what Mashiach is. This is a bit more of a complicated text, but it's a beautiful text.
What
Go
about
ahead.
the Lamed Vavniks?
I was thinking about that too, right? This idea that there are 36 hidden souls who are there to uphold the world. And so this is kind of what it is, right? These kind of sparks of Messiah that are around the world, or to help uplift the world. And you'll see right here, the Baal Shem Tov takes it even further. Ian, go ahead.
I would say, I thought the Jewish faith didn't really subscribe to reincarnation.
So the Kabbalistic thing.
So the Kabbalists
Yeah,
are,
Kabbalistic
they're a little
believer.
off the reservation on that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure.
It's become mainstream. It's
Yeah,
become,
yeah.
and the Kabbalah was so influential that it really spread. And so Judaism does believe in
Okay.
reincarnation.
Yeah. As the Baal Shem Tov, his soul in the hidden supernatural realms, teaches each individual in the people of Israel needs to repair and prepare the part of the stature of the Messiah that belongs to his soul. As it is taught, the initials of Adam, a human being, stand for Adam, David, and Messiah. And the stature of Adam, the first human being, stretched from one end of the world to the other, and the souls of all of Israel were included in the stature of the first human being. And later, through the sin of Adam and Eve, his stature was diminished. And in a similar manner, the Messiah will have a full stature composed of all the souls of Israel. That number 600,000, just as it was before the sin of the first human being. Therefore, every individual in the people of Israel needs to prepare the part of the aspect of the Messiah that belongs to his soul until the full stature of the Messiah is repaired and made ready. And then there will be a constant collective union at all times, speedily in our days.
So the idea that every one of us has a little capacity and stature of Messiah within us, and that we have to bring about that work ourselves, and that it's us who kind of prepare the way for it to happen, right? The Adam, right? A human being even means Adam, David, and Messiah. So to be a human being, like human beings, our very role in the world is to bring about this kind of messianic consciousness and world and being. And so we're every one of us has part of that within our journey in the world. There's a Baal Shem Tov sees it, and then I talk about this whenever there's a circumcision or whenever there's a baby naming. This baby we're joining that. What it means to be Jew is joining that mission, of bringing this into the world. And I kind of I wanted to conclude, not conclude, but bring our last section of the session to talk about where we are right now and kind of what's happening. And as I was saying, the elderly rabbi I used to work for, who used to believe, that because of the return to Israel, that the Jewish people are to some degree, we're witnessing something that at least to our internal story feels like the beginning of the Messianic age. I remember reading this story, great story by the cartoonist behind a series for the Jerusalem Post called Dry Bones. It's one of the great kind of Jewish cartoons. Really, I recommend everybody to read it. And it's written by an American Jew who is living in America, not particularly religious, at all. But one day, I think maybe this is in the 60s or 70s, you heard about the prophecy of Ezekiel, which was, right, one day God is going to take the dry bones, all the dead people of Israel, and raise them up and send them to Israel. And suddenly he had a flash in his mind. He was like, that's the Holocaust. The dry bones are the Holocaust, and then raising up and going to Israel. And he's like, whoa, this is happening. And suddenly he said, I've got to move to Israel. He moved to Israel and he started this cartoon called Dry Bones. And all his cartoons are kind of about trying to make the Israeli experience alive for American Jews. Is
Is it in a book?
and there's a book about it. Yeah, I've got a book. You can buy the book. I'll send over a link. Right, we do, and after all, we do say, right, in the prayer for Israel, the first flower we call the state of it, bless the state of Israel, the first flowering of our redemption. However we look at it, one can hope that there's something there, and also, even as we were saying before, that there are a lot of people these days, even though as you were saying, Octavio, not everybody, who are more interested in this, right? I'm more interested in these matters that we're talking about and in this kind of consciousness. And so the prophet Amos says, right, days are coming, this is 3,000 years ago, 19 days are coming, says the Lord, when I will send a hunger into the land, not a hunger for bread nor a thirst for water, but to hear the word of God. And, maybe people are finally getting to that place where people are hungry for this kind of thinking and being. A lot more people are interested in this, and there's even, the interest in some of the things that are out there in this world. Not all of it is, all of its own development, but near-death experiences and all these things that are, showing us that society is starting to take into account all of this in a more direct way. And maybe even, it's funny, all this, as I was saying, all this internet stuff connecting us across the world is kind of almost like a prelude to a more kind of unified, it's making us feel connected to people around the world the way that we never were, and feeling their pain and their joys. And that's maybe a part of humanity being more ready for all of this. And even looking at the period we're in the world now, which is a very challenging period, I think. And this idea of back and forth, and looking at all the turmoil in the world is maybe part of some resistance to some of humanity is trying to move forward. And there's all kinds of places in the world that are saying we don't want to move forward. We want to stay back in the way we want to. Looking at Russia, and we want to. We don't want this new world. We don't want a new world. So maybe, but at the same time, the way the Kabbalah looks at it is that even though there's this back and forth and these intense negative reactions to the movement forward, in the end, it's not such a bad thing, because it allows humanity to refine its idea. What do we actually want? What does it mean to be humanity? What do we want? What is it that we're looking towards? And the resistance kind of strengthens those parts of humanity that are trying to work towards this, and makes them stronger and makes them work stronger towards it and be more open.
But does a Messiah have to be a person? I mean, when you read some of this, can't it just be a phenomenon?
I think it could be. It could just be a phenomenon, and it could also be that there's a person, but maybe the person won't be that we imagine. That saying the person will come and raise a staff and everything will change. That person will embody a teaching that will help the world make that change, or help the Jewish people. Or maybe there'll be more than one. Who knows? But their idea. Sometimes you need, like Moses, or the Baal Shem Tov, or teachers who help bring things forward. So you could have that, but at the same time, but the work has to come from humanity too. We need to be involved. We need to do that work in ourselves, and we need to bring that consciousness, and do it.
It reminds me, and maybe Norma can join me on this. As therapists, we come across a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And some of these people often come looking for that kind of like guidance, and kind of like looking for somebody to kind of take them to another level, right? Because they're like it said here, and I was thinking about that too, where it says little by little, where it's
the light part.
yeah. little by little, they're getting their consciousness to develop further and further and further to reach that other level of life that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, we come across that all the time. I can share so many stories from clients that have
Yeah.
like created these transformations,
Uh-huh.
that is like, wow, and I would say, it's not me, because obviously I'm not the Messiah, but, but they're looking for that, right? They're looking for that guidance, and they're looking for that,
Beautiful.
for that light in their life.
They're trying to bring it in their own life more.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not always an easy process, right? There's
Right.
things in the way,
Yeah.
and you can't do it all for them, but
Right.
they have to do their work themselves.
Exactly.
It's in there. They
It
just
is.
don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's what they're, a lot of people, when they're trying to reach that conscious level, right? Is really trying to find themselves.
Mhm, exactly, yeah. And maybe humanity finding ourselves is finding this world of peace and love. We just don't know it yet, right? We think ourselves as, being an eternal war, but if we really find who we really are, then we'll be at peace with each other. And that's all this is. We're going through group therapy with God as our therapist, or the world is and the world is the arena of our therapy.
Yeah.
The world is the arena of our therapy.
Yeah.
And we're trying to come to it. And then every now and then we need the switch therapists to get us into a new, after 2,000 years, we need a little something new to get us going to the next level. Well, let's end with this last text number 8. So Abraham Isaac Cook, Rav Cook, right, the first rabbi of Israel, who as someone who lived when Israel was being transformed. He didn't live to see the establishment of the state, but it was happening, right, in his lifetime. He thought a lot about this, and also he was looking at the fact, even from his point of view, that a lot of the Jews who were moving to the land of Israel were secular and were kibbutzniks and not at all as religious as he was. And he was saying, well, how is this all going to happen? None of them are interested in religion. The people who are founding the state of Israel for 2,000 years are not religious, but he had the whole really beautiful belief, first of all, that they were even holier than some of the religious people, because they were embodying love and some qualities more than the religious people were. But he also believed in different stages to this process of, knowing oneself and attaining new levels in our own growth. So Ian, since you've done all the others, let's have designated.
All right. I am certain that when the revival of the Jewish nation begins to awaken, there will be a spiritual rebellion in the land of Israel and amongst the people of Israel. Material tranquility will come to a segment of the people who will imagine they have reached their entire purpose. This tranquility will diminish the soul. Days will come of which it is said there is nothing desirable in them. The yearning for elevated and holy ideas will cease, and so the spirit will descend and sink. But then a tempest will come and overturn everything. We will know clearly that in the treasure of Israel rests within eternal holiness, in the light of God and his Torah, and the desire for spiritual light. The rebellion takes the form of a materialistic tendency, and it is necessary that this tendency manifest with vigor amongst the entirety of the Jewish people. After so many years have passed in which the need and ability to engage in physical pursuits were completely removed from the entire nation. When this materiality will be born, it will rage furiously like hurricane winds. And these winds are what are referred to in the phrase, the birth pangs of the Messiah.
And so it's, for Israel and for the whole world, and, humanity now need to work through what you got to work through, right? And so we only hope, right? Hope that for Israel and for the whole world, a little tempest will come to speed things up in the near future. And in the meantime, we can all do our work of doing the best in our lives to bring some about this consciousness and trying to, at least in our own little spheres, bring about peace and love and think about these things and work towards it.
It reminds me of that song, Imagine.
What song?
Imagine.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Was he well regarded in his time?
Yeah, he was considered to be some of the very orthodox, they couldn't deny his brilliance and that he was a chief rabbi, but he annoyed some of his religious contemporaries because he was so open to the secular and so, but he was beloved. He was totally beloved. With his,
Well, it seems like Israel right now has this internal strife.
yeah, really, that's why I kind of ended with this, that,
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know, but it seems like the ultra orthodox are fighting to keep a way of life. The whole country's kind of divided about it.
yeah. Yeah, well, the ultra orthodox are, I mean, they're the ones who are supposed to be so religious, but they're so not open to any difference, you know, and how can you help bring the Messiah when you're
Just our
so
way or the
close,
highway.
completely closed?
You want to study all day, right?
Yeah, and
Get this higher
they
consciousness.
want to study all day, but what are they really studying? You know, and is it happening at the level of mind, or is it happening at the level? If they were, if in my mind, if they were studying all day long with real love and saying at the beginning of every time they're studying, thank you to the rest of Israel paying taxes to support me. I dedicate this to you. If they were doing that every time they learned, and they were learning stuff that was mind opening and heart opening instead of just drilling down into Talmud, which Talmud is beautiful, but I think that I would be more open to them having a role as well. But you know, the fact that they feel so superior and triumphant over everybody else, and they want everybody else to support them financially, you know, that just seems like a bad combination.
The women are working.
Right, exactly. The women are working and what a life they have, right?
Having babies.
Having babies and working hard but I mean, there's, yeah.
The
Can I just say,
government is
when,
like
whether,
Go ahead.
can I just say, since I'm not going to get any further into politics than you've gone, which I must say is up to your neck. But I do want to say the jury is out on whether Messianism and the focus on it is going to be good or bad for the Jewish people or the world. And I think a lot of rabbis have thought that for centuries. That's just what I wanted to say.
So the idea of, you know, of the Messiah. Well, I think that when one takes the idea of the Messiah in its most concrete form, then it can be a negative idea, because you're looking at thousands of year old texts about the Messiah coming and girding his loins and whacking him, you know, and if you think you're in the realm of ultimate truth, then that's thinking in a very concrete way. But I think in the way we've talked about it today, which is looking at it in a very spiritual way, where we all have a spark within us to bring a world of love and of peace. And that's really where humanity is headed, is a very optimistic idea. And it's a beautiful idea. And for us to keep waiting for it and to wait and to hope that there will be people along the way men and women who will help us bring it to fruition, I think is a nice idea, and not to make it an obsession, you know, but to make it an optimistic idea and focus. So we each have our part, and I think that's when you do that, and you focus onto one of the most powerful ideas of Judaism, that it is possible to have. I imagine that it is possible to have that world, and we believe in it, and we're going to keep working on it despite looking at the world and saying, I don't see it happening. So when the Jews were walking into the concentration camp saying, I still believe in the coming of the Messiah, I don't think there was, in my mind, they were saying not only I'm waiting for this person, but saying I believe in a beautiful, just world, even as this horrible thing is happening to me. And it's good. That is incredible. I mean, I can't say not everybody did that and understand why, but it's, you know, we look at the world around us, but then nonetheless believe in it and work towards it. Is an incredible idea,
Yeah.
and I think one worthy of holding on to.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.